Hello everyone, welcome. Now, I wanted to talk about something that it's been happening. It's kind of already happened. The games came out, but in case you weren't aware, and to be honest, I actually wasn't aware of this until just recently. Persona 4 Arena on the PS3 is region locked. And I was not actually aware of this. There was a really huge flame debating war. People mad, people upset, people trying to be understanding, defending, saying it's stupid or wrong, and that happening on basically anything related to the topic. And, well, I read a lot of it, and I pondered about it. I've always considered region locking anything really stupid in today's world. But, this whole thing gave me an interesting different perspective on it that I've never thought about before. I've never really realized the American dollar is cheaper than the yen. Now, it's should probably have been obvious, actually, the economy's sucking. I am not really into money exchange and stocks and such. But I never really thought about that. Now, Atlas explained the reason was because the American and Japanese version of the game basically have no freaking real difference. You have English, Japanese, English text, and Japanese text. It's basically a more built-on version that has everything the Japanese version has, and it's coming only a week after. Well, it's out now, but its scheduled release was coming a week after the Japanese release. So, I guess the basic thing is they were concerned that Japanese would import the American version because it's cheaper than the normal Japanese price, when you take an account of how the yen gets exchanged into dollar bills through importing and such. And that's just seems really bizarre, but it makes sense. But so as a business aspect, I totally understand why they did it. I understand, but I do share a lot of concerns other people have against region locking. I still don't like region locking. Like in the old Stone Age days, well, men barely do things outside own country. No internet or computers or very limited. Ooh, future note, don't do that again. But, these days, we have friends and shit all over the world. People go to colleges in different countries. People go on business trips and shit. It is not weird or bizarre in the world we live in. I have friends in Europe. I have multiple friends in Europe. On Final Fantasy XI, I had two really close friends in Germany who I keep in contact in Facebook with, because one of them doesn't play Final Fantasy XI anymore, and his brother doesn't play it as much. But we live. What I'm kind of saying is, I'm not trying to argue whether it's, morally right or wrong. Obviously what I personally think is my opinion. But my opinion is that we live in a world where all nations interact online and in society and business and everything far more than way back in the Stone Age of gaming ever did. And, and we got little countries that don't even have real game markets. They have to buy other people's games. There are little countries that really exist that they have to go, which one would be easier to access? Japanese, American, PAL, and then I have to import that, and then I have to be stuck on that software on that. So, you know, with the PS3 version, these people didn't have to really worry about that. It is a bit of a tricky subject, to be honest. The game is being basically available in all the normal formats of Japanese, American, and European, but the European one currently has no real date. So, as long as it technically came out, what Atlus did isn't really being as big of an effect as in you being capable of playing it. It's being more of an effect of, can you afford to play it? Because, like, let me give you an example. I read one person's comment that they're in one of these small countries that basically was saying, and they decided to go with the Japanese version of the system. But then they later decided that the American games would be easier to import. So in this situation, he is now forced to buy the Japanese version, which is more expensive. So, he's not being denied access to it, it just costs more, so kinda sucky, but at least you can still play it. I would love to be able to play Pandora's Tower right now, which I do read there might be a profitable way of doing that, but it might risk breaking my system, so that's something I'm very cautiously approaching now. But, so, to be honest, what Atlus did is questionable to a certain extent, but as it looks like, everyone will be able to play the game eventually. America and Japan already have the game. Europe, not really known yet, but it already has a publisher, so eventually. But basically, in this situation, it's being an argument of you maybe being forced to pay more based on what PS3 you decide to go, whether it was your local or if your country even has a local. But it really made me think about a different situation that has and more interesting. Unlike Persona 4 Arena, which is pretty much planned at least everywhere, the Nintendo DS and 3DS. Now, as we all, well, if you're into importing and playing Japanese games, the original DS was region-free. The DSi introduced region locking, and the games would have newer games incorporated region lock into them. However, it would only work in DSi and up. So if I got the second Fire Emblem remake game on the DS that came out in Japan, that had region locking in it. But I have an original DS, so it doesn't. The region locking doesn't work in the original DS, so it still plays. But with the 3DS being fresh out of the market, it started with region locking off the bat. I remember when Pearl and Diamond. Where are you? Are you behind Skylanders? Yeah, I had the Pearl version. I remember when Pokemon Pearl and Diamond came out, there was mass importing of that game into America. Now, I don't know if Nintendo kind of has the same idea, because technically that would mean they got more money, actually. Possibly, or I don't know. I mean, it kind of depends on the exchange. I mean, you're changing dollar into the yen, and since dollar was worthless, wouldn't that actually mean that you're being exchanged into less yen? Yeah, I don't know. Exchange stuff and that gets my head hurting, but I wonder if the whole reason Nintendo decided to add region locking to 3DS had a similar situation to Persona 4 Arena. Like, is it the same reason? I mean, there's not usually too often will games, or at least at the same time in multiple regions, that's not a very common thing. And I mean, Pokemon Black and White, if I remember quickly, was some of the first original DS games to get region lock. But it got me really interested to wonder about that. But ultimately, the whole thing comes down to, is it white? It's an opinion. But considering our society today, I enjoy games like Final Fantasy XI, and I continue wanting to play Final Fantasy XIV, even though people criticized it being a horrible game because it wants to move a concept forward that I like. A concept where our world plays together. That's what I like about Final Fantasy XI probably the most versus World of Warcraft. I mean, there are other aspects, obviously, like the gameplay and that. Like, World of Warcraft's good for quick, instant gameplay, while Final Fantasy XI is good for more, like, tactical and thought, but it requires more time consumption. Like, World of Warcraft can usually be more quicker in that, but on the other hand, value of equipment has been devalued in World of Warcraft, where it has more value in Final Fantasy XI, but those are other arguments. But my point is, I like playing with my friends, and a lot of my friends don't even live in my fucking country. I have lots of friends that live in other countries, and games like World of Warcraft and Blizzard continues to do this shit where you can't play with people of other countries and shit. Like, what the fuck? Didn't we just get on about talking about that we're in a world where we interact a lot more than, you know, back when we were kids? Like, I know when I was in the NES age, I didn't even know what the fuck half the countries were around the world. It's ridiculous, to be honest. I admit, I don't know how to solve this issue with buying a cheaper game from a different area to your area. I don't really have a solution for that. But I don't really think it's the proper solution to just lock out people, because I don't know 100%, but to my understanding, Persona 4 Arena shouldn't really affect anyone's ability to play the game. It'll affect their ability to get the cheapest version of the game, since it will be available in Europe regions. So it should cover all codes, and I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure like Japanese, Asian, or cross-compatible or something like that. I'm not too familiar with the Asian region coding very much, but I think it's horrible to make a game not accessible to people. Like, I love so many games, and it's like, I even own games that I can't even play. Like, I have Shin Tensei 9 for the Xbox. The original Xbox, not the Xbox 360. And not a lot of people know about that one. That one was originally supposed to be Shin Tensei Online, but it got scrapped. Its online mode got scrapped, and it just got made into a game, which ended up as that. I own this, but I can't ever play it, because the original Xbox doesn't have any access, and I hope one day maybe I'll have some way to get a modded version of the console or something. I always have to rely on ways to get bypass stuff like that, and the only one I ever heard for the original Xbox was to mod it. A PS2, there were many PS2 titles I wanted. You know what I had to actually do to play Japanese PS2s? I had an import system. Yes, there are alternate ways for PS2, but many of them don't guarantee full compatibility. So I imported one. But, you know, demanding that your customer import multiple systems is stupid. I mean, here's a scenario I hear all the time these days. Okay? And this was somebody who posted about, there were worries about this, about the Persona 4 Arena thing, but this is an excellent example. I've heard this kind of story multiple times. I'm like a college student from so-and-so country, and I went to another country with my system, but I buy so-and-so game for the said system, and it won't work, because it's region locked. Now, a lot of people love the PS3 for this reason, and I can see why a lot of people who relied on this reason are pretty peeved. But I've seen this a lot of times. Like, apparently one military guy got a 3DS that was a different region. He brought it back to America and gave it to his child, and they can't get any games working in it because they're all region locked. It's such a meaningless thing to the society of the consumer. In a business way, I understand the business way of why some companies would want to do it. But for the consumer's convenience, it's not very good, because I travel. I haven't gone to another country. I have been wanting to go to Britain before, though, but I mean, and there are people who travel all over the world. There are people who live in other countries to do school, college, learn, just fucking culturalize themselves, learn some culture, and it's really a tricky subject. It really is. But I don't feel it's the right thing to do. Now, I'm not going to be one of these people who are like, boycott Atlas and shit. Atlas admitted why they did. Atlas apologized for what they did. Atlas has never wronged me before. They've never pissed me off, and they're always very communicative and talk and such. I'm not really mad about Persona 4 Arena. It's, as far as I'm going to understand, it's going to be available for every region of PS3 there is. So there should not be any of this problem in playing. It basically comes to a matter of the soonest you can play it in money. But it's not going to make it where you can't play it. And I'm sorry if it's going to cost a lot more. That does suck. But at least you could play it. You know, be honest, I wouldn't mind paying, and I know this is obviously apparent, I wouldn't mind paying a little more if I could get Pandora's Tower to work in the Nintendo Wii, in my Nintendo Wii. I wouldn't mind, because I really want that game. But, you know, obviously some people, they're not willing, and, you know, that's obvious. You know, you have your priorities, what kind of money and spending you want, or such. That's fine, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying that's wrong. But at least you technically can play it. So it's not a matter of not being able to play that individual title. But when it comes to titles like other stuff, say like Dragon Quest, Youngust's Mysterious Dungeon, and that never came out in any other countries except for Japan, the region lock is really bullshit. It's so hindrance to fans in other countries, and the company doesn't want to bring it to us or localize it or do anything for us or think it'll sell well or not. I mean, what pisses me off the most, if, like, you know, hell, if Xenoblade and Pandora's Tower were region free and they didn't publish them in America, I might be a little peeved, but at least I could still play them. I could import them, you know. I could import them and play them if they were region free, and I wouldn't be so pissed off. But it's the region protection that limits playing it that pisses me off the most. Especially when there's no easy way to go get around it. But overall, I'm willing to let Atlas trip over and say it was a mistake. And it might not have been Atlas themselves. After all, we gotta remember, Atlas was bought out by another company. And it's obvious that probably more likely this other company's decision in this for interests of money. But hopefully they'll get the idea that they may want to strongly reconsider this option and either try to maybe push delays between the releases of that, which I'm sure there are people who won't really like that idea. I personally don't mind as long as it just comes out. You know, I don't mind a few months or something. Sure, maybe I would really like it now, but if ultimately it's going to come to the decision of limiting people to play the game, but of course that varies on where it all gets released and everything. Such a difficult subject. I truly don't have an answer of how this could be solved, because it all comes to business and money. The yen, the dollar, the euro, and whatever other form of currency is being exchanged to a different funds. It just all comes down to money, and the yen is going up, and apparently, from what I read, that's actually hurting Japan, because people are importing things as opposed to buying their local versions of things to save money, which is it's kind of ironic, you know. I mean, I remember back in the PS1 and 2 era, people in America loved importing lots of Japanese games, and now it's like now Japan is importing games from other countries to save some money. It's kind of weird. But at least Persona 4 Arena, as far as I understand, as far as I understand when it comes to regions, those the Japanese, American, the European, and the Asian version of regions. I'm not aware of any more. If there are more, then there's so many countries in this world, I tell you. But as far as I understand, it's going to be available. So, at least that ain't the situation with Arena 4. Persona 4 Arena. But I do hope companies don't look at this and go like, hey, you know, I should totally do that. Because it's like, I don't like that. I mean, like, for games that stay in Japan only, importing's more money for them. Like, you know, when I got Dragon Quest Yangus's Mysterious Dungeon, that gave Square Enix more money. When I got that was used. I get new imports, but, you know, obviously old stuff that's no longer available. Let's see. Well, most of the PS3 imports I have, I've been on my other shelf. But basically, I mean, like, if it only comes out in Japan, that's just money in their pockets from importers. But in this situation, I can see why it's harming them. So, I just basically want to say that Atlas, or the company that purchased them, I believe they're Image, I believe they're called. I just hope you understand why people are making a big deal out of this. I do think it might be going a little too far, considering at this point, it's, as far as I understand, going to be available for everyone, so it's just you're being forced to buy the region version of your PS3. So, again, it just comes to a matter of money, and for Europeans' case, getting it now as opposed to waiting for the European release. So, still a bit controversial, varying on people, but at least it will still be playable. But I hope in the future, and they did state that this isn't going to be a future practice or anything, it was only solely because of this. However, you know, I would like to point out one thing somebody did actually pay mention. If this was indeed the case, why was all versions, well, nobody knows if the European version will have it, but the American and Japanese version are region locked. If it was a case of worrying that the English version would be imported, why didn't they just region locked the English version and leave the Japanese version unlocked? That is an interesting question, and I don't have an answer for that. Since the Japanese version is basically the one that would net them the most money, you'd think they would leave it open to get more money. But guess that would be another discussion for another time. I just end this note on hoping that they understand the community's worries of this, because, I like a lot of different franchises. I like a lot of them. I like Dragon Quest, I like Shin Tensei, I like Boktai. I still want Boktai 3 on the Game Boy Advance. I didn't want that fucking DS game. Damn you, Konami. No. Well, I have the DS game, but it's a reboot, and that's a whole different story. I mean, there's all kinds of franchises I like, and half of them have games that never came to America, or even some don't have franchises like Live a Live and the Romancing. Well, Romancing is a franchise, but I mean, like, those individual titles are awesome that never got to come out and stuff. And almost all console systems had a form of region locking, though many of the old ones were easy to bypass. Well, I just basically wanted to throw out my thoughts on all that. I know it probably was kind of a long rant of rambling and that, but there's a lot of topics if you want to look more into it yourself. If you have any thoughts of your own opinion of that, feel free to leave a comment, But please, let's keep it civilized, No need to be... I know it's a bit of a tricky subject with some people. And I'm trying to be understanding for all parties. The company, the fans, people, me. It's a very tricky subject for everyone. And sadly, with any decision, somebody's always going to get hurt, sadly. But I hope you enjoyed the ramblings, and I will see you next time, dear viewer.